Week 2 was a wild one, but with it, we got more data, a slightly larger sample size of info to work with, as well as injuries, busts, surprise performances, and much more that we'll try to unpack to get you guys ready for week 3. I'm John Macri, and for this episode of the PFF Fantasy Podcast, IDP edition, I'll be going game by game to break down all of the IDP relevant start-sit info there is to cover heading into another week of the fantasy season. So let's get it. All right, we're going to get into all the matchup data heading into week 3 in just a sec. But as always, before we do, I have to ask, actually, before I even ask, I should say thank you to you guys who tuned in last week, lit up the like button, asked all your questions in the comments, and just showed so much love to the show in general. I truly can't thank you all enough for being so supportive of the show. Last week was like our most liked video ever on the YouTube channel, the highest viewed start sit video we ever did. And that's because of you guys just being so damn supportive. And really more than anything, that motivates me to continue doing the best that I can and providing as much possible information as possible every single week to help you guys win. So my only ask again is, if you want to help me win, help the channel win, then please continue to like and subscribe. Hit the hype button on the YouTube mobile app. There's a thing that does, it helps as well, I guess. Apparently all free and makes all the difference in the world for me and the channel. You guys crushed it last week. So let's see if we can keep that going, because I know there's still a decent chunk of folks who haven't subscribed yet, but hopefully soon. Also, if you want to go even further than that with your support, get access to all my written content over at pff.com, which includes the IDP fantasy report, where you could find all the snap shares for every single IDP, as well as like alignment data, man zone team coverage rates, my notes, waiver wire targets, everything you could possibly need to dominate your IDP leagues, plus like my weekly IDP rankings, man zone coverage report, red zone report, all that great stuff. Make sure to subscribe to PFF Plus. Use the promo code PFF Fantasy Podcast 25 for 25% off a PFF subscription. We're treating this as kind of like an internal competition among like the PFF podcasts. And you guys showed the F up last week to really help us in that competition, which is massive considering that we're the smallest pod on the network. So if you have the means to do so and you want access to all that great content on the site, please use the code and let's beat the rest of the PFF podcasts. And more importantly, show them that IDP and fantasy content in general matters. And maybe, just maybe, we'll get some more resources to do even more with the channel and .com content even further. So again, PFF Fantasy Podcast 25 for 25% off. And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be a salesman. I have to do it because these are the things that keep the channel going. It's what keeps me employed as well. I literally cannot do this without you guys and your support. So truly thank you all for the support already. And we'll continue I'll continue to thank you in the best way that I know how, by covering all the IDP weekly information as in-depth as I can, answering all your questions to the best of my ability. And when it's all said and done, helping you win your fantasy championship. So now that that's all covered, let's get into the games, and we will do the timestamps in the episode description as well, so you guys can bounce around and find the games you're looking for. But let's start with the AFC East Thursday night football battle between the Miami Dolphins and the Buffalo Bills. We'll start with Miami and their linebackers. Really easy to sort through here. Both Jordan Brooks and Tyrell Dodson continue to operate as the full-time linebackers in Miami, which has been great for their production so far. We expect that to continue this week. The Bills, through 2 games at least, have given up the 5th most tackles to the linebacker position, so have to imagine that these guys will eat again this week. No concerns about locking Dodson and Brooks into lineups. As far as the Miami safeties go, because Buffalo, interestingly enough, is also giving up the 5th most tackles to the safety position through 2 games. However, there is only one safety in Miami worth trusting right now, and that's Minkah Fitzpatrick. Ifeatu Melifonwu continues to kind of share snaps with both Ashton Davis and Dante Trader Jr., so we're not trusting anyone not named Minkah from that Miami safety group. And then on the defensive line, This isn't necessarily the best matchup for pass rushers, especially in Miami, where there's still a pretty heavy rotation among the edge rushers. They've all been under 70% of snaps, which isn't the end of the world if you need them. Like, we could still work with that most weeks. The problem is Josh Allen has been really good at avoiding sacks despite just an average offensive line so far this year. So if we are going to trust the Miami edge rushers, it'll probably be Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips for me. They play the most. They are going to get the most opportunities. Chop Robinson only played 40% of the snaps last week, so don't love that. And Zach Sealer, of course, for DT required leagues, he'll be good to go as well. But yeah, just not the best matchup against Buffalo this week. So we'll talk about Buffalo here now. Their linebackers, Terrell Bernard. I know people have been really disappointed with his output so far. That was me coming out of week 1 against the Ravens. Last week, though, I will forgive him because he only played 37 snaps, which was more a result of the team, the Bills defense as a team, only getting 47 snaps on defense, and then Bernard resting for 10 snaps in garbage time. So you could only do so much with that many snaps. So I'm fine trusting Bernard again this week. Matt Milano is going to be out for this game, so Dorian Williams becomes an interesting option. He's been pretty effective when he gets out there, so I like taking a shot on him if you need the linebacker help. Miami so far, though, have been awful in allowing linebacker tackles, probably because the offense is pretty useless. But remember, we're working off a pretty small sample of just 2 games so far. That number can swing quite a bit with 1 game still. So I'm willing to trust those guys since they are in full-time roles. For Buffalo's defensive line, I think both Joey Bosa and Gregory Rousseau are absolutely in play this week against Tua Tagovailoa and company. Tua has allowed a 50% pressure to sack conversion rate so far, which was silly coming out of 1 week, but the fact that he's maintained that through 2 games now makes this a really enticing matchup. I know Rousseau hasn't quite delivered as expected so far, but this is one of the more ideal matchups for him to get home. Same with Joey Bosa. He's looked great so far. He leads the league in forced fumbles with 3. His pass rush metrics have all been great as well. Like, this duo, I think, should be able to take advantage of Tua and Miami this week. Ed Oliver will not be back. He was ruled out already, so not ideal for DT required leagues, but Joey Bosa, Greg Rousseau, definitely in play here. And then the Buffalo safeties, Cole Bishop delivered a really nice game in week 2. He got a sack. He led the team in tackles. Him and Taylor Rapp are moving around pretty evenly as far as box snap and deep safety snap distribution. So it's not like there's a clear box safety there, but still both fine options if you need them. I have him in the like kind of low end safety 2, high end safety 3 range this week. Okay, moving on to the Sunday games. Houston Texans versus Jacksonville Jaguars. We'll start with the Houston Texans. Let's start with their defensive line. The stars of this defense, really, right? Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, they absolutely cooked last week against the Bucs on Monday Night Football. They'll remain locked in lineups for the most part. I will say, though, as rough as Jacksonville's offense looked last week, their offensive line has been solid. And Trevor Lawrence, at the very least, has done a nice job not allowing pressures to turn into sacks. But Trey Hendrickson did get home as we expected last week, and we'll expect kind of the same from the high-end players like Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter to continue to be strong plays here. At linebacker, the Texans, Azeez Al-Shaair, Henry To'o, both startable. It's another, full-time linebacker duo that we don't really have any concerns about. Azeez Al-Shaair, he had the injury scare briefly on Monday, but he was fine, returned to the game. If you need them, they're good, though Jacksonville has been a little below average matchup for linebacker tackles so far. And then Houston, their safeties, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, a fine start for sure. Jalen Petrie got banged up a little in week 2, only ended up playing around 63% of the snaps. If he's healthy, you could probably play him. And Jacksonville is running a higher rate of 11 personnel, so he'll be on the field a lot, again, if he's healthy as that primary slot defender. Jalen Petrie could be a good play, but he's going to have to be active for this game for that obviously to be the case. Okay, and then on the Jacksonville side of things, the linebackers, Foye, Oluokun, we talked about him last week and why you should be, confident starting him. I'll probably only mention him one more week, really, this week, barring any significant changes from him, just because he should be locked in as an LB1 in our lineups. zone heavy defense, a history of being an absolute tackle vacuum. We leave him in the lineup. Doesn't matter that Houston is 31st in tackles per game to linebackers so far through 2 games. Again, small sample. Foye shouldn't really be benched unless you're in like a one linebacker league and you have like Roquan Smith or something. Devin Lloyd, he did increase his snap share quite a bit in week 2 to a nice 69%. I'm not trusting him yet, though. He got an interception. I don't care. We don't need to be risky, with him risking snap shenanigans or anything like that with this guy. Let's wait until we see a little bit more consistency there. Jacksonville defensive line, Josh Hines-Allen, making me look like an idiot, obviously. He didn't get the sack last week, unfortunately, but it's not like it was really that bad for him. He had like 3 QB hits. Hopefully your league scores them. He added 6 tackles as well. Once again this week, it's an enticing matchup for both Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker. The Houston offensive line is not great. CJ Stroud continues to be kind of a sack magnet, right? Like not panicking on Josh Hines-Allen yet. He and Walker, I think, should both have increased odds to get a sack this week. And then DB wise for Jacksonville, Jordan Lewis is CB1. We covered him in both weeks prior to this one, and hopefully you listened and added him in CB required leagues so you don't have to fight over him on the waiver wire this week. Just continue starting him. He's the nickel, but he stays on the field in non-nickel situations. So he's more matchup proof than most slot cornerbacks. And then if you need anybody else from this DB group, Andrew Wingard, also fine. Okay, let's go to the next game, which is the Cleveland Browns and the Green Bay Packers. We'll start with the Packers and their linebackers. Edgerrin Cooper and Quay Walker. This is already actually our third 100% linebacker duo to cover here through 3 games, which you love to see. But both of these guys should cook this week, especially Cooper, right? He's been super effective so far, more so than Quaker, despite both of them playing 100% of snaps on the same defense here, right? Like Walker, he's kind of out here dealing like fine regular damage, but Cooper is delivering like critical hit rates, which is what puts him in that like true LB1 contention for the year, assuming that he can keep it up. And we did see the same level of efficiency with Cooper as a rookie. He shouldn't be leaving our lineups. And Quaker definitely a strong option for starting linebackers going forward as well. And then on the defensive line, man, Micah Parsons, Rashawn Gary, Devontae Wyatt, the Packers have apparently assembled the Triforce on their defensive line. I'm sorry, somehow that's 2 video game references within the same team. That wasn't intentional. Yeah, well, we'll keep going. What games are you guys playing? Sound off in the comments, as they said. No, enough. The Packers defensive line has been firing on all cylinders is what I'm trying to say here. And now they got the Cleveland Browns. It doesn't seem fair, right? Well, if you have those 3 Packers defensive linemen, fire them up. Devontae Wyatt in DT required leagues, absolutely top 10 pass rush grade for his position on the year. He leads the position in total pressures, playing around 3/4 of the snaps. He's been awesome so far. And then obviously we know who Micah Parsons is. We expect that snap share to continue to increase here going forward and just dominate as he does. And then the Packers DBs. Okay, once again, I think we're kind of breaking down what happened with the Packers DBs. I hope this isn't a weekly segment, but until we get some consistency from this group, it might be. Now, week 2 felt more like what the team wants to do at defensive back because McKinney and Evan Williams played full-time roles. Javon Bullard worked out of the slot, and he was not a full-time player, around 84%. The one thing will be how much Nate Hobbs works in, since last week, his first week back from injury, he played just 46% of the snaps. So if that increases, does Bullard's snaps decrease? Maybe, right? Like, so for now, avoiding Hobbs and Javon Bullard. McKinney is still fine, but he has been playing a ton deep, 78% of snaps deep so far this year. So been a much lower tackle output from him so far this season compared to last year when he'd rotate down toward the line of scrimmage a little bit more. Even Evan Williams didn't rotate down much. So really kind of safety 2, safety 3 types for me. And then the Cleveland side of things. So their linebackers, the big question this week I'm getting was Carson Schwessinger versus Devin Bush. So Schwessinger, he's been disappointing so far, right? Like there's no denying that. That being said, he's still a full-time linebacker, so he'll be in starting consideration. But that being said, he's kind of a good reminder that 1, college tackle efficiency does not translate to NFL tackle efficiency. I talked about that a lot during draft time. And two, man-heavy coverage schemes are bad for linebacker tackle efficiency, and the Browns are the most man-heavy defense in the league. So Schlesinger may be more of an LB3 type, low-end LB2 at best, but still playable. Devin Bush, yes, he had the better game last week, but still only a deep league option at around 77% of snaps last week. That's going to be his norm most weeks. So not trusting him over Schlesinger. That'll even out as the season goes on just by playing time alone. Defensive line, I will not talk about how Myles Garrett stays in lineups. I will not talk about how Myles Garrett stays in lineups. There, I did it. Okay, Mason Graham is somewhat interesting for DT required leagues, still purely from a volume standpoint, but the Packers do kind of pose a problem for pass rushers. Jordan Love, he has been great at avoiding sacks so far. Graham hasn't shown much pass rush prowess so far. Really just kind of a DT2 type for DT required leagues this week. And then DBs, Grant Delpit, he hasn't done much, but last week he played 51% of snaps in the box. The Packers haven't been a great matchup so far. Probably just like a safety 2 for me this week. Greg Newsome, I think a fine option for CB required leagues as well. Okay, going to Pittsburgh versus New England now. We'll start on the defensive line for the Steelers. We lost Alex Highsmith. He's going to be out a few weeks, apparently. Obviously, this sucks, especially if you're highly invested in Highsmith, like yours truly. But alas, we endure, another shot to the gut, and hopefully you have the option to add Nick Herbig off waivers to replace him, because Herbig basically steps into like this 1-for-1 role with Highsmith out. He's kind of like the best edge handcuff in the league from the past few years, because Watt and Highsmith, they've both missed time, mostly Highsmith. And Herbig is there to kind of fill the void quite nicely. So I'd be comfortable firing him up, especially against New England and Drake May, who owns a 25% pressure to sack conversion rate so far. Meanwhile, TJ Watt has not looked like TJ Watt through 2 games. I had talked about like his big drop off in pressure rate in the offseason, but generally a lot of his key pass rush metrics were still promising. Plus, he still plays more than enough. And we know he has that big playability on any given play. So he has that significant upside that would just suck to bench and miss out on, not unlike a Myles Garrett, right? So look, here's what I'll do. I'll do you a favor, okay? This is kind of my superpower. You ready? TJ Watt is washed. He's done. He might never get a sack again and is droppable in IDP. Okay? All right, now we wait for TJ Watt and the universe to take the bait. You're welcome, chat. All right, let's go to the Pittsburgh linebackers now. Patrick Queen, Peyton Wilson. Queen is a fine option still. We know what he is at this point. More of an LB3. Meanwhile, Wilson held an 86% snap share for 2 weeks in a row, which is great considering that there was a maybe that Malik Harrison's injury in week 1 contributed to Wilson's higher snap share. But then even with Cole Holcomb in that LB3 spot this past week, Wilson remained in that nice role. So New England have been pretty linebacker friendly so far, giving up the second most tackles to the position. It's not like I'm playing Wilson over any full-time linebackers necessarily, but he's definitely one of like the top, if not the top, non 100% snap linebacker for me this week. And then Pittsburgh defensive backs, Jalen Ramsey's been really effective so far. He's like CB5 on the year. He's getting work in the slot, playing outside, playing 100% of snaps. It's not an ideal matchup this week, but he's still one of the top cornerback options. And then we also got confirmation that Chuck Clark is in fact kind of the Deshaun Elliott replacement. We knew that last week, but also the team brought in Jabril Peppers. So I guess still not a guarantee if Peppers works in there, but especially if Peppers is inactive, then, we don't have to worry about some BS shared role or something like that, because Clark was good in week 2. He played 37% of snaps in the box, had a great IDP performance. So I'm typically fine, firing him up here and what should have been, the sweet Deshaun Elliott role, but it is what it is. Chuck Clark can be a fine waiver option if you need him. Going to New England now. New England, we talked about their linebackers a little last week. Another one of those kind of super man-heavy defenses. We talked about it with Robert Spillane specifically and his below-average tackle efficiency. It happened again in week 2. Luckily, he had a sack to make up for it a little, but gonna be hard to trust him as much more than like a low end LB2, probably more of an LB3, to be honest. Safety wise, both Craig Woodson and Jalen Hawkins still useful for sure. Woodson rotating down more often toward the line of scrimmage. So that's nice to see. Jalen Hawkins just 5% in the box. So don't love that for potential consistency. There was a point where like Kyle Duggar was leading the team in tackles during the game last week. I saw that, thought maybe he got his starting job back, but no, just 25% of snaps for Kyle Duggar and used only in certain packages. Defensive line-wise for New England, Milton Williams came through with 2 sacks. We talked about him last week and how there would be better weeks ahead. Well, that took very little time indeed for him to come through. So that was nice to see. And then Christian Barmore, also a playable option in DT-required leagues. So you got 2 DT IDP options in New England. Imagine that. And then Harold Landry continues to be kind of this volume heavy beast. He played 91% of snaps in week 2, fell into a sack again. And look, with a positive matchup this week, I probably should be starting for us once again. Okay, Indianapolis and Tennessee is up next. So we'll start with Indianapolis. We kind of have to start with Zaire Franklin, right? Because I sense the panic building. I know a lot of you spent high draft capital to get Zaire this offseason, and he has not delivered through 2 games. And I get it because it is concerning and it's frustrating that he's not returning that LB1 value. That being said, I think we probably do have to adjust our expectations here because with Lou Anarumo coming in, changing the defensive scheme to more of a man-heavy approach than what they were under Gus Bradley, like that isn't going to help. And through 2 games so far, it's been an issue. Not saying, he'll be below average in tackle efficiency this week or every week, but it does change at least a little bit of my rest of season projection for him to more of an LB2, unfortunately. Other than that, Joe Bacci's snap share increased to 81%. So that was good to see. And if he stays in that kind of 75 to 80% range, he'll be like a deep league option. Although again, worth noting, man heavy scheme. So really very deep leagues for Joe Bacci. Defensive line for the Colts. I hope we get Laiatu Latu back this week because I love this matchup against the Titans. Yes, I know Jared Verse didn't get the sack last week. Trust me, I'm aware. But everyone else on the Rams did. It was 5 sacks on Cam Ward last week. The Titans pass blocking is abysmal. Cam Ward owns the 4th worst pressure to sack conversion rate in the league. If we can get Latu back this week, then I'll be happy. He'll be in the starter range in the ranks. DeForest Buckner also for sure as well. He'll be DT1 for me this week. And then the defensive backs. So I know Cam Bynum has gotten off to a really nice start, 2 picks in 2 games, but I do want to note that this is kind of covering up for like his concerning usage. He played 83% of his snaps deep in week 2, 84% in week 1, and his low tackle output has kind of been covered up by those big plays, which we don't expect to really continue. And there's going to be some regression concerns here rest of season for him. Now, whether that comes this week, I don't know. He does get a good matchup against the Titans team that has so far given up the most tackles per game to safeties. But I'll like that more for Nick Cross, more importantly. And Cam Ward, look, he hasn't thrown a pick yet. I wouldn't say he's immune to doing so this week against what has been a pretty good defense in Indianapolis so far. But really, Nick Cross, kind of a safety 1 option for me. Bynum more of a low-end safety 2. And really interesting to me that Tennessee is last in tackles to the cornerback position so far, but they are first in the league in 11 personnel rate. I think that'll balance itself out here in the weeks ahead. So not really scared about starting Kenny Moore this week if you have him. On Tennessee, their defensive line, let's start with that because it's easy. It's Jeffrey Simmons. That's it. We're not going to entertain anybody else right now. Tennessee linebackers, Cody Barton is in a good matchup, but another guy who's kind of been very inefficient with his opportunities this year, or any year really. He's typically a below average tackler. So hopefully a positive matchup helps give him kind of a little boost this week. Cedric Gray increased his snap share to 93% last week. So he becomes maybe one of the better deeper league options at linebacker this week. Again, if the Colts continue to give up the top 5 rate of tackles per game to the linebacker position like they have through 2 games. And then the DBs, both Amani Hooker and Xavier Woods played a ton in the box last week, up over 50% each. Hooker had the much better game, though. He led the team in tackles, got a sack as well. Amazingly, Indianapolis have been just a really good tackle matchup for all IDP positions through 2 games. Now, odds are like 2 of those positions will fall off and maybe 2 stay high, but which ones those will be, I don't know. Also, L'Jarius Sneed, he was kind of eased in week 1, did not play his normal snap share that week, but in week 2 he did. So if you have him and you want to plug him in for a good matchup, you should be good to do so. Okay, going to the New York Jets and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers now. So we'll start with the linebackers for Tampa Bay. Jamien Sherwood, he bounced back right away. That was nice to see. We love to see that for a player that I had high expectations for this season. He had a really nice 12 tackle game, and he's just kind of the best option of this full-time linebacker duo here. Quincy Williams more on the low range of the spectrum of like 100% linebackers. Again, it's, one of these guys, Sherwood, is operating with the critical hit rate damage buffs. And the other, Quincy Williams, is kind of nerfed to throw little pillow punches, right? So definitely prefer Sherwood. D-line wise, unfortunately, Jermaine Johnson, he went from a really nice 89% snap share in week 1 to suffering an injury in week 2, and he is in question this week. So like Will McDonald, Quinnen Williams are kind of the only other options. Quinnen definitely in DT required leagues, and McDonald more one of those kind of boom bust options who kind of comes with a little bit more risk. So I don't love him, but I understand if you might not have better options, you could plug him in there. And then for the Jets safeties, rookie Malachi Moore, he stepped into a full-time role because Tony Adams got hurt last week. So if you're in a really deep league where full-time safeties carry value, then Malachi Moore could be an option alongside Andre Sisco. And then Tampa Bay. So let's start with the linebackers because there's at least a bit to cover here coming out of Monday's game. And I'll start with Avonte David because I made a comment on Twitter that if Servassier Dennis had like a true full-time role, then I might prefer him over Levante David, which pains me to say because I love Levante David, my Levante. But I'm not saying that just to kind of overreact to 2 weeks of data. You guys know I try not to do that. But the truth is that even last year, David was well below average in terms of tackle efficiency, coming in at like 10.6% tackle rate. But he still managed to be a top 12 IDP linebacker because of this kind of, hitting on a lot of the unstable big plays that really kind of covered up a lot of that tackle inefficiency. So 70% of his fantasy points came from tackles, which was a below average number overall. And among linebackers in the top 25 for linebacker scorers in IDP last year, the only player who was lower than that was Frankie Louvu at 57%. And you should all know how I feel about Louvu this offseason, heading into this season. And then even tackles versus expected wise, David scored in the 7th percentile at 20 tackles below expected last season. So really, I'm just worried that through 2 games, we're kind of seeing it still. And the nice thing is that, the big plays can still be there for him. He rushes the passer quite a bit. He got a half sack in week 2. Hell, he nearly had a pick, but somehow dropped it. So it's not the end of the world, but it is something that I'm going to build into my rankings of him going forward. And it's only going to cause him to fall in the rankings a little bit. Now that's Levante. The other linebacker in Tampa Bay is Servassier Dennis, who has been much more effective. But I know a few people who were watching the game that reached out to me that had some kind of eyebrows raised, seeing that Dennis was not on the field for the final 2 drives of that game. Now, I don't know exactly why that was, whether it was injury or disciplinary, but Deion Jones was out there, and Dennis was a 100% snap player up until that point. And he definitely had some bad plays in coverage. Through the first 2 weeks, 26.3 coverage grade so far is like bad. So because of that, I'm a little worried about trusting Servassier this week. We'll give him a week off, find a better option, hopefully, and just be sure here because that was at least concerning. Even though Todd Bowles came out, he said he didn't bench him, but also no injury news as of Wednesday at like 1:00 in the afternoon. So not sure what to trust here. Hopefully it's nothing, but let's just be safe with this one. because clearly just was taken out of the game in a close game on Monday night. So that could be concerning. Hopefully not a long-term thing. Hopefully it was just for that game, but something to watch with Servassier Dennis. Okay. That's enough of the Tampa Bay linebackers. Let's go to Tyke Smith. Let's talk about him because he is him. 55% of snaps in the box in week 2. That was up there in week 1 as well. I talked about making sure he was in your lineups. He delivered with another big game. And hopefully that was convincing enough for you. If you didn't start him last week, make sure you do now. And yes, I did have him over Winfield in the ranks last week. I'll have him above Winfield in the ranks this week as well. Even though Winfield will also be startable, I'm just trusting the usage here with Tyke Smith over Winfield. Winfield played just 18% in the box. Big difference from 55% with Tyke Smith, right? Defensive line, Kalijah Kancey is out for the year. Torn pec. That sucks. So we lose a big one there for DT required leagues. And lose an option really for IDP on Tampa Bay's defensive line. But you got Hassan Reddick, potential revenge game against his old team, the New York Jets, right? He played 84% of snaps last week. He looked great in week 1 as well. Like, I'd consider starting him this week against his former team. Yaya Diaby also played a ton, maybe more of a volume heavy play than anything though, but 82% snap share is pretty encouraging for Yaya Diaby. Okay, Atlanta and Carolina is up next. We'll start with the Atlanta linebackers. They've been interesting. And there is kind of an interesting shift to keep in mind here because heading into the season, Caden Ellis, he was the clear front runner for I think value and ADP wise everything, while Divine Diablo often went undrafted, right? So through the first 2 weeks of the season, Diablo also has a full-time role alongside Caden Ellis. So that's been huge. And that's allowed him to actually be more productive and more efficient as an IDP asset. And again, not trying to overreact to just 2 weeks of data, but Diablo's role itself does at least appear to be the more ideal one for IDP purposes. Ellis's role is very similar to what it was last year. He plays on the defensive line for, close to 20 to 25% of his snaps, and he's rushing the passer at an above average rate. So we know that creates that kind of high ceiling for Ellis if he's able to land a sack, but it also creates a lower general tackle floor, which is what we've seen basically exclusively through the first 2 weeks of the season. So for IDP managers trying to manage these two, Diablo makes sense as kind of the better, more consistent option. But for those of you looking to hit on maybe like the higher ceiling on any given week, then Ellis would make more sense. Atlanta DBs, Xavier Watts, Jesse Bates, also in a good matchup this week. Carolina, they gave up the third most tackles to safeties, and Watts looked great in week 2. Billy Bowman Jr., also a strong option. He's the team's primary nickel corner. Carolina play the second highest rate of 11 personnel. So Billy Bowman Jr. should be on the field a lot and can be productive again this week. Atlanta defensive line, I guess we can talk about. Everyone played less than 50% among the edges. We're just going to keep waiting for Jalen Walker or James Pierce to increase their workloads. Even though they had sacks last week, it's not enough snaps to trust just yet. Zach Harrison, like in DT required leagues, he could be fine. He's looked pretty good so far, though a 57% snap share, not really ideal. I wouldn't be surprised to see him kind of come back down to earth after a big game in week 2. And then Carolina, linebackers, nothing new here. Roseboom, 100% of snaps. A fine LB2 option. Trevin Wallace, really kind of a deep league option only. Defensive line for Carolina, Derek Brown in DT required leagues is about the only one, but not really trusting anyone else in this matchup, really. Like, wanna maybe as like a volume heavy play, and maybe he can rack up some tackles or fall into a sack, but it's kind of asking a lot of a mid player, right? And then the rookies, Zuman Milan, Nick Scorton, they're just not playing enough just yet. Carolina DBs, though, Trayvon Merrick remains a locked-in safety one option for IDP. He played 49% in the box this past week after 60% in week 1. He's led the team in tackles in each of the first 2 weeks. You get a positive matchup here. Yes, please. I would absolutely be starting Trayvon Merrick. Okay, Los Angeles Rams and the Philadelphia Eagles is up next. So we'll start with the Rams defensive line because Jared Verse has let me down through 2 games, but also it's just 2 games. Unfortunately, it is another tougher matchup this week against the Eagles. So hard to get too excited for Verse after kind of the lower than week 1 snap share for him and not really delivering against the Titans. But not impossible. The only thing is he's going to draw Jordan Mailata, which is never good. Byron Young, on the other hand, like he's kind of been unreal. He's doing basically what I expected Verse to do to start the year. But again, it's just 2 games, right? Let's settle down. But yeah, I'm fine starting Young, Verse, Kobe Turner, that gang, because at the very least, they play more than enough, and the Eagles will run quite a bit and give a lot of tackle opportunities to defensive linemen. And if they can get a sack, then that's just a bonus, right? So, yeah, generally okay with this group right now in this week. Linebackers, similar to Carolina, right? Nothing really changes here. Nate Landman, 100% player. He's more of an LB2 type. And then Omar Spates, only for deeper leagues. DBs, they're a little bit more interesting. Cam Curl is maybe putting together the year that we thought he'd have last year. And, when he really disappointed us, but 2 big games so far. My concern, I guess, is that he's not really this kind of locked in box heavy safety. Him and Cam Kinchins played about a quarter of their snaps in the box last week. So maybe we see some fluctuating usage there week to week, which could hurt the consistency. He's a fine start. Quentin Lake also should be fine as well. And hell, maybe even Cam Kinchins, but going to wait on that last one. Yeah. Let's go to Philadelphia. So we got another full-time linebacker duo, Zach Bond and Jihad Campbell, both good to go in most formats. Not really any concerns here. Despite the quieter start for both guys, like they'll be fine. It's just not an amazing matchup this week by any means, but we'll see if that changes at all. Rams giving up the 28th most tackles per game to the linebacker position. And then the defensive line for the Eagles. So they added Zadarius Smith to the mix this week. So the overall playing time of this group, it's going to be spread out quite a bit on the edge. Nolan Smith is really the only one that I'm trusting from that group in what's actually a decent matchup. And Jalen Carter as well, I should say, not just for edges, but interior guys. Jalen Carter, nice to see him, kind of keep his bodily fluids in his mouth this week. Pause. But yeah, he stayed out of trouble in week 2, I guess is what I'm trying to say. He played 80% of snaps. Jalen Carter did. Jordan Davis dropped to 53%. Moro Ojimo got a good 70%, but still really only trusting Jalen Carter for IDP purposes. And then defensive backs, great matchup for Cooper DeJean. The Rams giving up the 2nd most tackles per game to the cornerback position. DeJean, a 100% player with a lot of his work coming from the slot. And then safeties, I know Andrew Makuba had a great IDP game in week 2, but he's also only playing 80% of the snaps, still kind of sharing time a little bit with Sidney Brown. So that's not something we want to chase just yet. All right, Las Vegas Raiders, Washington Commanders are up next. Let's start with the Raiders defensive line, specifically Max Crosby. It was a quiet game from him in week 2, but he played all but 1 snap, I think it was. So nothing to be concerned about there. He actually gets a much better matchup this week against the Washington Commanders right tackle Josh Connerly Jr., who owns a 30.9 pass blocking grade through 2 games, which ranks 66th among 68 qualifying offensive tackles. He allowed 3 sacks last week, 4 on the year. That is the most among offensive tackles on the season. And it doesn't seem like Jaden Daniels is going to be at quarterback either. So we get Marcus Mariota, which only makes the matchup even more enticing for Supermax. So continuing to start him still. Linebacker wise, Devin White, full-time role, zone heavy defense. He's in that weekly LB2 conversation as long as that's the case. And then Jermaine Pratt, he played a decent snap share, but 68% of his snaps on the edge. It was a close to full-time role. I should say that. I could pull up the exact percentage of what it was last week because I don't have it off the top of my head. Actually, it was 76%, so it wasn't as high as I thought it was, but 76% of snaps total and 68% of his snaps on the edge. but he only rushed the passer on 14% of those snaps. So mostly kind of dropping into coverage, defending the run from that role, which has kind of saved him as far as tackle efficiency goes. But I do expect with that role, with that snap share around 3/4 of the snaps and playing so much on the edge, like I do expect that tackle efficiency to decline quite a bit here in future weeks. And then defensive backs wise, Jeremy Chin, still far and away kind of the better usage for the team's safeties. He played 40% in the box in week 2 compared to just 7% for Isaiah Polamau. So a clear, set strong safety versus free safety role deployment there. And we'll always prefer the strong safety in that spot. In Washington, Bobby Wagner, good to go. And then Frankie Louvu, look, we continue to highlight it. He's a boom bust performer, right? The usage, the role is what kind of feeds that IDP production for him. He spends obviously an above average amount of time on the edge. He's rushing the passer as well at a higher rate than most compared to his offensive linebacker peers, right? So through 2 games, it's been more of the bust performances, incredibly low tackle efficiency for the position. That's what makes him really kind of difficult to trust in most like weekly formats. We should really only be playing, him over, I guess, other full-time IDP linebackers if we're aiming for that higher ceiling, right? If we're behind in a game or we're not favored to win or something like that, you put in a Frankie Louvu and hope for him to get a sack or 2 to really boost your score. Otherwise, I'm looking more at your typical off-ball linebackers in that spot. Washington defensive line, Dorrance Armstrong has had a couple good games, still kind of more of a streaming option than anything. If you saw the sack last week, it was only because Jordan Love had to go down to kill the clock instead of throwing the ball away. But he's a fine streaming option, and it's not the worst matchup in the world. And then defensive backs for Washington, nice matchup for Mike Sanders still. The Raiders are above average in 11 personnel rate, so that helps a slot corner like Sanders still. And then Will Harris, Quan Martin, aka Jartavius Martin, aka Jart Mart. Both these guys, Will Harris and Martin, solid safety plays in a good matchup here as well. Let's move on to Cincinnati and Minnesota next. So we'll start with the Bengals linebackers. Logan Wilson's fine. He's good to go. But Demetrius Knight did see a decreased workload, just 58% of snaps in week 2. And that's mostly because he doesn't play on many passing downs. So if that becomes the game script, then this is what's going to happen. He's going to dip well below what we want to see from our linebackers in IDP. Plus, he's sharing a little bit of snaps on early down as well with Oren Burke. So only a deep league option is Demetrius Knight. Defensive line, it's just Trey Hendrickson for now. I know Shamar Stewart, he got banged up in week 2. Not even sure if he'll be playing this week, but Trey Hendrickson really the only one that we want to trust anyways. And yeah, it doesn't seem like JJ McCarthy will be at quarterback as well. So Carson Wentz will be in there, but McCarthy was really bad at avoiding sacks so far this season. So maybe Wentz will be a little bit better in that regard, but still, you're not benching Trey Hendrickson. And then the DBs for Cincinnati, Jordan Battle, another interception. So that was great. But worth noting that it was actually Geno Stone who played more in the box this week. Could be another fluctuating usage situation between these two. And if the picks aren't there, which they won't always be for Battle, then I do worry that, he won't be that kind of locked in weekly starting IDP option for us. Also, this hasn't been a good safety matchup so far, but again, quarterback change might change that as well. And then Dax Hill, really solid cornerback required option as well. He played every snap and 70% of them in the slot last week. So really like Dax Hill for CB required leagues. And then on Minnesota, their defensive line, Jonathan Greenard, good to go. Hargrave and Jonathan Allen, that's Javon Hargrave, and Jonathan Allen, both of those guys usable in DT required leagues. It's a pretty positive pass rushing matchup, though Jake Browning was better at getting the ball out quicker than Joe Burrow. We'll see if that continues here with him in his first start of the season. And then TBD on Andrew Van Ginkel if he's back. If he's not back, then Dallas Turner could be a volume-heavy option. I'm not trusting him to win too much on his own merits, but played 91% of snaps. Again, like, he did in week 2, like that's going to help him fall into a sack like he did last week. He had that one cleanup sack on Michael Penix, if you watch that game. But really that's a result of just being out there for a ton of snaps. So that was nice to see for Dallas Turner. Linebacker wise for Minnesota, Eric Wilson, the 100% snap player, fine with him. Ivan Pace, so his role increased to 89% of snaps last week. The only thing here is that his snap share being as high as it was, probably more a result of just the Vikings being shorthanded on defense with both Andrew Van Ginkel out. So that allowed Pace to play more on 3rd and 4th downs this past week, which he didn't do at all when Van Ginkel was in the lineup in week 1. But it also helped that Harrison Smith was out again, which forced the team to play 2 linebackers more often instead of their typical 3 safeties more often than not, right? So if Van Ginkel and Harrison Smith are both out again, I think Ivan Pace can be like a, non-shallow, deeper league option, but the return of either one or both of those guys for sure, that's going to probably hurt his overall snap share. So in that case, if I see Harrison Smith or I see Andrew Van Ginkel active, I'm not going to be starting Ivan Pace in those deeper leagues. And then Josh Metellus also kind of affected by the same situation with Harrison Smith being out. Like Brian Flores, he can't run his 3 safety looks. Usually when he's doing that, he's putting Josh Metellus up closer to the line of scrimmage, playing in the box as that second linebacker. We haven't seen that with Harrison Smith out. So if Harrison Smith gets back in the lineup, that's a big help for Josh Metellus potentially. If Harrison Smith is inactive again, then I probably don't like Josh Metellus as much this week. Okay. Before I go on to the 4:00 window games, I do want to let everybody know that this PFF betting segment is brought to you by DraftKings. We got a pick this week, another one from our betting wizard, Mason Cameron, and he went with the Thursday night game. James Cook with his longest run coming to be over 13.5 yards. It is minus 125 on DraftKings right now. So if you look at James Cook, even just last week, he went over that mark twice against the Jets, and that included a 44-yard touchdown run. Miami specifically has allowed 9 explosive runs through the first 2 games. That's tied for the sixth most. So we should see a lot of volume here for James Cook against Miami. Again, that's James Cook with his longest rush over 13.5 yards, minus 125. Odds are subject to change. So the NFL season is rolling. Every touchdown can bring you closer to a payout with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Every game is another chance to cash in. Don't just watch the action, win with it. DraftKings Sportsbook delivers the unmatched intensity of the NFL right to your fingertips, from first touchdown scored to anytime touchdown props or the thrill of live in-game betting. Every snap is loaded with opportunity. New customers, this one is for you. Bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Plus, score over $200 on NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Your season's heating up. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code PFF. That's code PFF to get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you place your first $5 bet, plus over $200 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Fees may apply in Illinois. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. See sportsbook.draftkings.com/promos. NFL Sunday Ticket offer for new subscribers only and auto renews until canceled. Digital games and commercials use excluded. Restrictions apply. Additional NFL Sunday Ticket terms at youtube.com/go/NFL Sunday Ticket/terms. Limited time offer. Let's go on to the Denver Broncos and the Los Angeles Chargers next. So we'll start with the Denver linebackers because we'll see if Dre Greenlaw comes back this week. If he does, great. He should be a full-time linebacker. Otherwise, we'll get a non-full-time replacement for him, which is Justin Sternad, who was fine last week because he got a sack, but we're not expecting that every week. So it's mostly going to be Alex Singleton that we're trusting for IDP. And he was at least much more closer to Kingleton last week with a 14% tackle rate. So hopefully a sign of things to come with him as he ramps up coming off injury. And it is at least a decent matchup this week. Safeties, Talanoa Hufanga. He leads the position in total tackles through the first 2 games of the season. Seems to be, I'd say, acclimating incredibly well to this new defense. Both he and Brandon Jones, they've been used kind of interchangeably when rotating toward the line of scrimmage. However, it's been Hufanga that's kind of made the most of the opportunities so far. It's been some good RNG on Hufanga's part, which has been good for him. And it's not like Brandon Jones has been poor. He should still be an effective option himself. Like I have him as DB22, Hufanga's DB9. But definitely encouraging that Hufanga has been as effective as he has in this defense, because that wasn't necessarily the case for most of his time with the 49ers. Denver defensive line, Zach Allen. He's going to stay in lineups for DT required leagues, no question there. Still playing a ton, still really effective once again. Nick Bonito, bit more of a question mark this week because he should see a ton of Joe Alt in this game. Bonito lines up almost exclusively against the opposing team's left tackle, and Alt through 2 weeks has been one of, if not the best pass blocker in the league. He's allowed just one single pressure on his 76 pass blocking snaps so far this season. So I'm treating Bonito closer to that kind of low end DL2 this week. Chargers wise, shout out to Diane Henley, man, with the Michael Jordan flu game last week. Gave us a scare with the questionable tag on Monday, where even with 4 teams playing, like the options were kind of limited in a lot of leagues, but he pulled through and delivered a massive game with a sack and an interception included. He's making it up, I think, to IDP managers who started him in the fantasy championship week last year, and he came up with literally nothing that week. This is kind of like his apology tour, I think, and it's been glorious so far. So keep firing him up, and then Troy Dye for deeper leagues. Chargers D-line, Khalil Mack going to miss some time with injury. So I don't know. It's really Tuli Tuipulotu. I'm not starting Bud Dupree. Not an ideal start. I don't think, or even Tuipulotu. This is a bad matchup, and Tuipulotu has been average at best. Bo Nix has been one of the best in the league at avoiding sacks, and the Denver offensive line has been the best pass blocking unit in the league. So don't love this one for the Chargers pass rushers. DBs, Derwin James, still, yes. And then Tarheeb still a solid CB required option, even in a non-ideal matchup against the Broncos, just as far as a team that doesn't play a ton of 11 personnel. The nice thing about him is that he stays on the field in non-nickel situations, and the Broncos are giving up the 3rd most tackles to corner. So even if he's not going to play a ton in the slot or as much as he does usually, he should still get a lot of opportunity this week. So like Tarheeb still. Okay, New Orleans and Seattle is next. So we'll start with the New Orleans D-line, because Carl Granderson has been on fire through 2 weeks. And look, we talked a lot about his positive regression likely being a thing quite a bit this offseason. So I'm very happy to see it. I worry maybe a little he's going to cool off a bit after starting so hot. But the nice thing with Granderson is that he's playing a ton. That should continue even when Chase Young rejoins the lineup. And he's one of the best tacklers at the position, which was a big reason why I was so high on him this offseason, on top of the likely positive sack regression. I think he was like edge 17 in my draft ranks. Ultimately, I think that's where I still project him kind of going forward in that range. But obviously, anything higher than that, and we still win, assuming you listened to me and grabbed him where I had him ranked. Perfectly fine matchup as well for him this week. So continue starting him as kind of a high-end edge 2. New Orleans linebackers, they've been solid so far. It was a little concerning that Pete Werner's snaps dipped below 90% last week. So that's why he's still kind of more of a deep league option only for me. And then that high-end tackle efficiency from week 1 for both guys, that didn't continue in week 2. So far we've gotten kind of a week where the zone-heavy defense wins out, and then a week where the 2 players who have typically been inefficient tacklers relative to the position has also lost out, because that inefficiency came through again in week 2. So odds are that'll be, kind of the case all season, some good, some bad from this group, which is why they're kind of LB3 options still at best. Werner lower than that with the snap share fluctuating as well. DBs for New Orleans, Alontae Taylor saw a big increase in week 2. He went from 55% of snaps in week 1 to 100% in week 2 while playing primarily in the slot. Love to see that for Alontae Taylor's IDP potential. It's not the best matchup this week, but if that usage holds, he'll at least be on the field for 100% of snaps. So that obviously helps. And then also rookie Jonas Sanker, he did indeed fill in for the injured Julian Blackmon, and both he and Justin Reed rotated down toward the line of scrimmage. pretty heavily. Sanker specifically was pretty productive, 8 total tackles. So like to see that from Sanker in his first start. Can be a deeper league option if you need him. On Seattle, linebackers, Ernest Jones locked into lineups. We're not moving him. Tyrese Knight, deep league option only. Seattle safeties, Julian Love, really quiet last week, but the Saints have at least, they've been a positive matchup for safety tackles so far. So I'd expect Julian Love to bounce back this week. We'll see if Devin Witherspoon is back as well. He missed last week, but obviously we like him for CB required leagues. Defensive line for Seattle, it's a pretty heavy rotation among that edge group, especially with Uchenna and Wosu back. Boye Mafe still likely the best option if you have to, but ideally you have better players to plug into your starting lineup at defensive line. The defensive tackles are far more interesting, in my opinion, for Seattle. Leonard Williams still a good option, and the Byron Murphy breakout season is off to a really nice start as well. He's coming off a 1.5 sack game in week 2. He has the potential to be a locked-in weekly DT required option if he keeps up the playing time and obviously the pass rush production that we assume he should be able to, because he is a solid tackler as well. Arizona and San Francisco is up next. So let's start with Arizona's linebackers, because it's, again, another easy one. Mac Wilson, our lone IDP option since he's full-time. Akeem Davis-Gaither, really kind of deep league option only. Defensive line for Arizona. Josh Sweat was fine last week, but pretty concerning that nobody on that defensive line played more than 55% of the snaps. It was a heavy rotation at all positions on the D-line. I don't want to trust this group, but if you have to, then Sweat is the one on the edge that I would trust the most. Calais Campbell may be in DT required because he's actually good, which the rest of the Cardinals interior defensive line can't say. But even he played less than half of the snaps, right? Despite getting the 2 sacks last week. So going to be hard to trust that. Budda Baker, we know we're starting him. He's such a damn good IDP, elite tackler still. Jalen Thompson, also fine if you need him. Garrett Williams, suffered. He had a knee injury in that game. He did not return. He's kind of been like the top IDP cornerback option for Arizona because he plays a full-time role in the slot and he plays outside as well. So worth monitoring whether he's good to go, because it is actually a decent matchup against the 49ers this week. On San Francisco, another easy one to start at linebacker. Fred Warner, D. Winters, both of those guys are starting for us. They're both 100% snap players. Defensive line, Nick Bosa. You already know that's really it for San Francisco's defensive line. Like, outside of Bosa, it is such a mid group across the board. Like, even rookie first round pick Michael Williams, like, they're trying to make him a thing in year 1 by playing him a ton, but he so far hasn't acclimated well to the league, kind of as expected. But again, it's just 2 games. So he could be an option later on in the year as he gets better and kind of starts to show something pass rush wise. But right now it is only Nick Bosa. Defensive backs, Marquise Sigil played 45% of his snaps in the box last week. Jason Pinnock played 31%. So obviously lower than the 60% that they both played in week 1, but we kind of expected that. And both of those guys still usable for IDP if you got them. Rookie Upton Stout is the kind of interesting for CB required leagues because he's the team's primary nickel corner. Unfortunately, the Cards have not been great for opposing cornerbacks, giving up the second fewest tackles to the position so far, but they also rank 26th in 11 personnel rate. So I'd expect Stout to come off the field more often than we'd like. He'd probably be a matchup dependent option for us. And this is not the kind of matchup I'm looking for with him. So leaving him on waivers or the bench this week. Going to Dallas and Chicago next. So we'll start with the Dallas linebackers. It's still Kenneth Murray here, unfortunately. So he could be used as a full-time player. Jack Sanborn did increase his playing time last week, though, to 84%, but still only going to be a deep league option considering he's coming off the field on a lot of the obvious passing situations. And Chicago has been a top 10 team in the league in pass rate so far this season. So harder to trust Jack Sanborn outside of the deepest leagues. Dallas defensive line, they just signed Jadeveon Clowney, so that edge rotation is likely to get a lot messier than it already was. Like, I'm just avoiding this group for the most part this week and most weeks, to be honest, until someone emerges. Like even James Houston, he got a sack in week 2, but he played the fewest snaps of that group. So we're not trusting that. Solomon Thomas has been effective so far for DT required leagues, but he's clearly playing behind Kenny Clark and Osa Odigizua. So not trusting Solomon Thomas either. Dallas's defensive backs. Nice to see Donovan Wilson have a good game in week 2. He played 36% of the snaps in the box. He's a fine start if you need him in deeper leagues. And then we'll see if Deron Bland comes back. I'd like him as well, since he was playing more in the slot in week 1 and would likely be a full-time player against the Bears, who have been an above average matchup for tackles to the cornerback position. And then on the Bears, their linebackers, TJ Edwards going to be out for a while. So Rigatoni Sewell, aka Noah Sewell, he should be a full-time player. So I'm fine rolling with him out there if you need him alongside Tremaine Edmonds for as long as TJ Edwards is out. DB wise for Chicago, Kyler Gordon still hasn't played this season, though. When he gets out there, he stands to be one of the better CB required options for the rest of the season. And especially in this week's matchup, like against the Dallas Cowboys. This matchup was highlighted for Andrew Phillips last week of the Giants, and he had a monster week. And Gordon, just playing a similar role, should also kind of benefit from this matchup. So Gordon is expected to play primarily in the slot against the Cowboys, who run a top 5 rate of 11 personnel. So that'll keep him kind of heavily involved and close to the action. So if Gordon returns this week, then he should be started in most CB required formats. Otherwise, Jaquan Brisker, Kevin Byard, also fine as well. Brisker played 37% of the snaps in the box in week 2. Still expect him to be an effective IDP this season. Chicago's defensive line. Montez Sweat is interesting this week. He didn't do much last week, but he did have a sack called back by penalty. And he actually looked really good against the Lions offensive line, 86.1 pass rush grade, 21% win rate. He now gets the league's worst pass blocking unit in Dallas this week, so that should help. The only thing that I guess is keeping me from having him as a higher end option this week is that Dak Prescott has been pretty good at not letting pressures turn into sacks so far, and Sweat does have a tendency to disappear at times. That being said, generally like the matchup here if you have / need him. Same with Deo Odiengbo. Okay, going to Sunday Night Football now. Kansas City Chiefs and the New York Giants. So we'll start with Kansas City's linebackers. Again, easier situation to sort out here. Nick Bolton, more of an LB2 type. Drew Tranquil, more of an LB4 type. He's not playing full time, so harder to trust him. But Nick Bolton should be fine still. And then defensive line, Chris Jones, I'm going to bet on him landing a sack this week against Russell Wilson and the Giants' interior offensive line, even though he hasn't looked like his usual self so far. This is kind of the week where we should expect the Chiefs to get back on track as a whole, Chris Jones included. And if not, then, they probably got bigger problems, and then maybe we can start to panic, but we're not there yet with this Kansas City team. And DBs, Jamari Connor, that's the one. He's him. That's who we should trust every week. The rest I don't really care about, to be honest. So Jamari Connor, really the top option that I like there in Kansas City for their DB group. Giants have a lot more options at DB that I'm interested in. I mean, Drew Phillips, he was awesome last week as we expected. Going to continue starting him. And then Paulson Adebo as well. This guy was on just a ridiculous pace last year for cornerback production in IDP before he got injured. And then so far this year, he's doing the exact same thing, even on a new team in a new defensive system. His production has been nothing short of impressive once again. He leads all cornerbacks in total tackles with 20, locked in CB required option going forward. As far as Tyler Nubin, I've gotten a lot of questions about him so far. It's not the best start, and he's not playing in the box as much as he did last season. So I did move him down to more of like a DB2 range in the ranks. Ultimately, I think he'll be fine, but understandable that you guys might have better options available this week. Linebackers, Bobby Okereke is the only one I'm trusting. Darius Mawasa was LB2, but he played just 26% of the snaps. No, thank you. Giants defensive line, Sexy Dexy remains a top defensive tackle option. Don't need to play around with that. Abdul Carter, though, he did pass Kayvon Thibodeau in snap share in week 2. This could end up fluctuating week to week a bit, but Carter is the better pass rusher already. We assume this would happen in year one. It was just a matter of when. It's still not a guarantee that it's all systems go for Carter rest of the year over Thibodeau, but a good first step, I think, was taken in week 2. It's not an ideal matchup this week against Mahomes and company, so it's easier to keep Carter on the bench, but definitely worth monitoring to see if his snap share increases even further in the weeks ahead. Okay, final game of the week, Monday Night Football, Detroit Lions versus the Baltimore Ravens. Let's start with the Lions linebackers, both Jack Campbell and Alex Anzalone playing 100% of the snaps. And yes, I'll reference one more linebacker operating with increased crit rate buffs and the other being a pillow puncher for like the third time this week. But Jack Campbell is the good one. Anzalone is the bad one. There will be the odd week where that changes, but 9 times out of 10, we're trusting Campbell as the top option. And hopefully this Ravens offense can be more tackle friendly for us going forward, because so far they have not. Detroit's defensive line, Hutch got his first sack of the year last week, so that was great. He's also playing a ton, which we love. It's understandable that he's not delivering like the insane pass rush metrics that he was to start last year before he got hurt, but it doesn't mean that he won't return to that form. Like, let's just give him some time since he's coming off a pretty nasty broken leg. Like, it's okay that he's not posting that 30 whatever percent win rate that he was last year, considering that the fact that he's playing 95% of snaps and still does look better than almost all edge rushers is what we really want to see. Like, he's a top 15 graded edge through 2 games. He's top 20 in pass rush grade. Like, that's really impressive. And I think a testament to his talent and, you know, what he can do considering he's coming off that leg injury last year. So go watch that injury back. I'm telling you, tell me what you'd expect someone to perform coming off that injury. I promise you, Hutch's performance so far this year is beyond those expectations. Okay, that's enough glazing of Hutch. I love the guy, so I'm going to glaze. That's unavoidable. Eventually, I'll get the jersey behind me to match it up. But anyways, Ravens offensive line. They've been surprisingly poor so far this year. Lamar has actually been below average in avoiding sacks, so it's not the worst matchup for him. So yeah, still starting him. DBs for Detroit, Brian Branch, so good, man. He's another one who delivered a nice bounce back game for us in week 2. Hopefully you didn't bench him after a quiet week 1, because he is one of our ideal IDP safeties. And then finally, the Baltimore Ravens, the linebackers. Roquan just out there doing LB1 things last week, scored a touchdown. He's not leaving your lineups. We don't need to waste time on analysis there. Teddy Buchanan, he did take a massive step forward toward taking over that LB2 role from Trenton Simpson last week, which admittedly, while expected, it was still sooner than expected, right? Teddy played 82% of snaps in week 2. Trenton Simpson played just 21%. So Teddy is a deep league option, and Simpson can likely be fired into the sun if you've been holding out hope. And then defensive line for the Ravens, Kyle Van Noy got hurt. Probably expect him to miss this week. It's also not an easy matchup, so not really trusting most of the Baltimore defensive linemen. More just kind of interested to see how Mike Green does, because he played a ton once Kyle Van Noy left the game, and I have high hopes for him for dynasty purposes. So hopefully he looks good in what I'd expect to be his first real start of the season. And then lastly, defensive backs for Baltimore. Both Kyle Hamilton and Malachi Starks are playable. Hamilton is still the clear top option for me. They had the positive safety tackle matchup last week, so that did help Starks, but he also played up over 70% of snaps deep. So expecting a little bit more inconsistency from him than Hamilton kind of going forward. Whew. Okay, that is it for another full week IDP preview. Again, if there's anything I missed or I didn't cover, you could check out the IDP fantasy report. I'll attach that in the comments. Like I suspected, it's going to be a locked article to subscribers to PFF.com going forward. But if you like what you saw in the free week 1 version, getting all the snap counts, alignment data, my notes, waiver targets, everything you could possibly need to dominate your IDP leagues all in one article, you can use the promo code PFF Fantasy Podcast 25 for 25% off a PFF Plus subscription. And it's all yours all season long. And remember, it will help Nate and I defeat the other PFF podcasts in this little competition, which would be pretty cool, again, as the smallest podcast on the network. So if you can and are willing to, I'd greatly appreciate it. You'll get access to my rankings, which are also out now. You could check out those for any kind of clarity you might need on this week, plus so much more. But then, yeah, I completely understand if you can't. I will happily settle for a like or hype or subscribe to the YouTube channel, which is all free, also a massive help to me. So thank you all again. And as always, feel free to ask questions in the YouTube comments. I will try to get to them all. I don't think I missed anyone last week, and there were a lot, but if I did miss you, feel free to yell at me this week, and I'll try not to miss you again. Okay, that's enough for me. Thank you all for watching. Good luck in week 3. And until next time, peace out.